Hello, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis, and welcome to another live virtual meetup here on our Anomaly Archives YouTube channel and our Facebook page. Thank you for joining us today. This is going to be a very interesting presentation from our good friends that we know. We've known these folks for years, and they were instrumental in getting us started in this new series that we launched back in February of the beginning of this year, 2020. This was supposed to be a in-person, real-life meetup event that we were going to have at our wonderful location downtown Austin, 55 North IH 35 at the corner of Lambie and the northbound interstate frontage road. But there's this little thing happening around the world that I'm sure you're all very familiar with and feeling the effects of. But we're doing the best that we can under these circumstances. Before we begin our presentation tonight, I just wanted to make a few announcements. Of course, the Anomaly Archives, if you've been visiting our webpage, you probably noticed that we are, or getting our email newsletter, we are still temporarily closed due to the current COVID crisis. We are now starting to take research visits by reservation only, so we have hosted at least one researcher doing some research in our archive recently, and we're glad to be able to help in that way. And so our friends tonight are return guests, Einida, Excs, and Viktor Criterion, who helped us launch, like I say, back in February of this year, these new monthly meetups. We started back in February with this series that was designed to every other month, do the Anomaly Adventurers Club meetup in person, and that every even-numbered month, February, April, and June, etc., we were going to be doing these Anomaly Adventure Club meetups with our guest hosts, Einida and Viktor. And at the first one that we have not yet posted the video for, but we're going to be doing that soon, it was titled Bring 'em Back Amused, the tale of Frank Buck and his Monkey Mountain. That was a fantastic presentation by Einida and Viktor, and tells the tale of Texas's own Frank Buck, who was legendary for his love of animals and his crazy ideas about how to entertain the public and educate them about these amazing creatures. And unfortunately, with the COVID crisis, we had to cancel our March and April meetups. But starting in May of this year, just last month, we launched our first new online virtual meetups, and that featured me and a volunteer named Eric Harrelson, who's been instrumental on Saturdays helping out in the Anomaly Archives for the last year or so. And we're looking forward to continuing these. We're going to continue with the Adventure Club every other month. And we're going to also start having some other special speakers, hopefully maybe starting with next month's meeting, which will be on July 11th, and probably at the same time, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. And just really excited about this. You know, these friends first told me about their idea for this pretty much around the turn of the year. And we discussed this idea of the old adventure club that was started in New York by a bunch of folks who used to go around the world looking at exotic and interesting locations. And so we've sought to kind of reinvigorate that, to endeavor to revive and inspire this sense of wonder and adventure, but more inclusively. And as I mentioned, they did the Frank Buck presentation back in February, and tonight's presentation is going to be very interesting. Originally, they were going to be talking about zombies, one of my favorite subjects, but the more the work they did on that presentation, the longer and bigger it became, so we can look forward to a grand zombie presentation in the future. But tonight they're going to be talking about the sacred wells of Nuraghe, Sardinia. And I first really learned about this through them, actually, because they were lucky enough to make a trip over there to check it out, and came back with many interesting tales to tell. So tonight, today, we're going to have them give their presentation. And if you have any questions or comments, you can add those to the chat or comments area there on our YouTube channel for this page, for this stream, as well as the Facebook page that this is also streaming at. And hopefully those will come through. And at some point towards the end, when we start taking discussion questions from the audience, we can put them up on screen like this. And that's just me saying, hey, everybody. So, like I say, you can put your comments over there, and we look forward to seeing what questions y'all might have for our guest presenters today. So, here as we get started here, I'll introduce our guests in just a second. All right, so I'd like to bring on our guest presenters today. We have Einida Excs. Hey, Einida.
Hello.
And now we have also Viktor Criterion joining us in the virtual studio here. Hey, Viktor.
Hello.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Well, as I say, we're going to hopefully get some questions at the end. But if we're not, I'm really just looking forward to hearing what y'all have to say about your trip and the research that you've done on this subject. And I guess we'll go ahead and let y'all take over from here. Okay?
All right.
Sounds
good.
Add your presentation, and I'm going to get out of here.
Welcome. Furat ki benet dai sumare. Whoever comes by the sea comes to rob us. This is an old Sardinian saying. Now, Sardinia is a land of mystery and conquest, a delightful historical legacy of mixed cultures going back thousands of years. The island of Sardinia has been conquered by many cultures, including the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians, the Saracens, the barbarians, the Romans, the Vandals, and then later they were ruled by the Spanish, the Genoese, and the Pisans. And yes, all of these conquerors and rulers came from the sea. So what is Sardinia known for? Primarily, today, it's known for its gorgeous beaches. And it's also known for being a geographic and demographic blue zone, which is an area where a large number of people live to be over the age of 100. Other blue zones are Okinawa, Japan, Costa Rica, Greece, and Loma Linda, California. So no one knows why Sardinia is a blue zone, and that's not the only mystery found there. Though the island is the second largest in the Mediterranean, with an area of over 9,000 square miles, it has within its coastlines mysterious Bronze Age fortifications called Nuraghe that are found nowhere else in the world. And it has the finest example of a Carthaginian graveyard in all the Mediterranean. There are also 50 sacred wells that are over 3,000 years old that may be aligned to unusual lunar phenomenon. And it has a Stonehenge with over 200 menhirs deep within the geographic center of the island. It also has legends of giants and pygmies and unusual structures called the Tomb of the Giants. There's also a pyramid older than the ones found in Egypt. And finally, the fantastical remnants of a Bronze Age settlement deep in the belly of the sinkhole. So before the 1930s, Sardinia was advertised primarily to travelers that wanted to go hunting and fishing. There are not many books were written about it other than two primary sources, and one of those sources was books by the Sardinian Nobel Prize winner Grazia Deledda and the English writer and poet D.H. Lawrence. He wrote a book called The Sea in Sardinia, and he visited in January of 1921. Now, visiting Europe in January tends to be rather cold and rainy, and it seems as though he didn't have a very good time. But one of the things that he did do was he took a little train called the Little Green Train, which is a very, very slow and winding train that goes through the wildest parts of Sardinia. We were really excited by this idea of taking a train that's been around since the 1920s. And when a taxi driver asked us what we really wanted to see when we were in Sardinia, we said, "Oh, we've got to ride the Little Green Train." And he laughed at us for about a full minute and said, why do that? Go to the beach instead. But we did go to a beach, but anyway, so we also went to many other sites including the Nuraghes, because that is the thing that Sardinia is really known for. They're mysterious Bronze Age fortifications, and there's over 7,000 of them that dot the island. In fact, there's so many that a group of Nuraghe enthusiasts have formed an organization called Nuraghe, which tracks and catalogs all of the Nuraghe. The Nuraghe are circular stone towers and complexes that were defensive fortifications built in the 1600 to 1200 BC. They're unique to Sardinia, and they were prone to being dismantled by treasure hunters because of the local legends that said treasures were buried deep beneath the Nuraghe. Now, most Nuraghe have been found in various states of ruin, and so, but yet there's still so much known about them. And one reason is because during excavations, they've found bronze and stone models of the Nuraghe, which have enabled accurate reconstruction of the structures. Now, why would there be bronze and stone models? It's because apparently they were status symbols back during the Nuragic during the Nuragic times. Now, the father of Sardinian archaeology, Giovanni Lilu, was born near one of Sardinia's largest Nuraghe. He was inspired to become an archaeologist so that he could excavate this giant mound in his village. Though he was born in 1914 and died in 2012 at the age of 97, he is still spoken of with great reverence today. Now, the Nuraghe that was in his backyard is called Su Nuraghe at Barumani, and today it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's the largest and most complete example of a Nuraghe complex. It was constructed with massive stones and giant lintels, and this site features a staircase which is constructed in the narrow space between the outer and inner walls. Now, our experience of visiting the site was that it was unexpectedly dangerous, and there was a lot of climbing and ducking and dark, narrow corridors with a collapsed staircase. It was very hands-on. So when I asked the tour guide what would happen if somebody sprained their ankle, she just laughed, and she said, "Don't do it. It will take a long time to be rescued." So next we're going to talk about Tuvajedu. Tuvajedu is a remarkable Carthaginian necropolis in the capital city of Cagliari. It means hill of little holes. And it was in use between 600 and 300 BC. There's about 1,100 Punic and Roman graves that are 3 to 8 meters deep. There's 3 types of tombs: the hole tombs, which were carved into the side of the hill, the well tombs that were dug straight down, and then, of course, the well tombs with rooms, which is self-explanatory. Now, the tombs used to be covered with wood, but now they're empty holes and can be seen from space as these very dramatic dark rectangles. At the local museum, you can see a reconstruction of the tomb, of what a tomb looked like back in the 600 BC, where the walls were very brightly painted. It is the most important Carthaginian grave site in the entire Mediterranean. Next, we're going to talk about Santa Cristina and the sacred wells of Sardinia. Many months before our trip, I read that Sardinia had a sacred well that was oriented to lunar phenomenon that happened every 18.6 years. This is called a lunar standstill or a lunistis. A lunistis is the moon's version of a solstice, and it utterly fired our imagination. Like, what kind of culture tracks something that happens so infrequently? Because many cultures track the movement of the sun and the phases of the moon, but tracking a lunistis is not nearly as common. And so we were. This was one of the main reasons we went to Sardinia, was to learn more about this site. Santa Cristina isn't the only sacred well on Sardinia. There's over 50 other known wells. They're of various types and sizes and different levels of restoration. And as you can see on the right, there is a flooded sacred well where you can just see the stairs underneath the surface of the water. Now, Santa Cristina is the best example. In 1857, it was rediscovered. But it wasn't until the 1950s that it was renovated by Giovanni Lilu, the father of Sardinia. He said that Santa Cristina's proportions are so balanced, its geometric composition so exact, so rational, that it doesn't seem possible for it to have been built around 1000 BC. And in our experience, when we were there, we felt the same way. Because when you first visit, you see a trapezoidal hole in the ground. And it's so unexpected. It's very beautiful. And then you descend 24 stairs down to the well, and you've entered this staircase that has mirrored lintels. So you're above you is an inverted staircase, which is fairly unusual. And the stones are so finely cut as to seem modern and very, very out of place. The construction itself is with T-shaped smooth ashlars made out of very finely chiseled basalt. And the stones are of equal height and stacked with a technique known as opus isodomum. All of this is precisely made and constructed without mortar and extremely rare for being 3,000 years old. Now, the overhead view shows you that there are seating that rings the outside of the well itself, and that there's a hole in the top of the well. Now, the hole allows shafts of sunlight and moonlight to shine down onto the walls of the well and into the surface of the water. Santa Cristina was most likely a lunar observatory. And every 18.6 years, the lunar standstill, the lunistis, the moon will shine through that opening and reflect onto the water. Since the well stones have a 2-centimeter overhang, the moonlight catches the ridges of the walls. And as the moonlight climbs down the edges of the wall, each rung of a ladder lights up, and it apparently is a very, very intriguing sight. Back in 2015, archaeoastronomer Arnold Leboeuf said that Santa Cristina may not be the only example of a lunar observatory belonging to the Mediterranean Bronze Age. And then he asked, is the scientific community ready to accept a monument of art and science such as this within a Bronze Age pastoral culture? The next lunistis is going to happen on April 2015. And so we can all hold, 2025, yes. Now, of course, Santa Cristina isn't only a lunar observatory. It has a solar observatory element as well. And during the equinox, the light will shine down the staircase and reflect your shadow onto the wall of the sacred well. Now, the other thing that Santa Cristina is a highway rest stop. During our visit, there was only one other person there. And in the site itself, you can find a Nuraghe complex, an 800-year-old church called Santa Cristina, which is where the well actually got its name. And there are cottages there from the 1700s that the religious pilgrims stay in that are in use to this day. Twice a year, people visit the church for religious reasons. Now, the next item of interest is the Sardinian Stonehenge, known as Beru e Conchas. It means trail of the heads, and it's located in the geographic center of Sardinia. There's 200 sculpted menhir boulders or rocks, and many of them are in various anthropomorphic shapes. Most intriguingly, there is a very large stone that has a map of some sort carved on it. Now, as far as the scientists have figured out, they think it may be an actual layout to the arrangement of the stones. When we were reading about the site, the literature kept stressing about what an undeveloped and natural state this site is. And it turns out that's very true, because in contrast, the English Stonehenge has had a number of massive renovations. Starting in 1901 through 1964, massive amounts of restoration have happened to English Stonehenge. Over the years, they've used cranes to move the giant lintels, and they've used tons of concrete. And in the early 1900s, 6 stones were entirely moved to different locations. And back in 1954, when another round of renovations was happening, scientists were really concerned, and they said they were worried that the original positions were going to be lost. Well, the renovations happened anyway, because they wanted to enhance the value for students and for visitors. Now, interestingly, the extent of these renovations were never mentioned in any of the guidebooks. And it wasn't until 1995 that the full scope of how much renovation has been done at Stonehenge began to emerge. Now, back in the 2000s is the first hint of the scale of renovations that have happened at Stonehenge began to show up in the guidebooks. So that was quite a shock. Anyway, so another fascinating thing to be found in Sardinia are the Tomb of the Giants, also known as the Tomba di Gigantes. We were at our favorite museum in the capital city of Sardinia, and we were talking to a docent who we were asking, well, what should we see next? And he said, oh, you've got to see the Tomb of the Giants. They're really great. And we said, oh, sounds good. And the docent said, but I have to ask, you do know that there are no giants buried there, because sometimes people come to Sardinia expecting to see giants and they're disappointed. And we said, yes, we are sure that there are no giants buried there. Now, when you see the Tomb of the Giants, they look like a giant burial ground. The mounds, or the structure is 5 to 15 meters long, and it's only 1 to 2 meters high. There's over 800 of them found all over the island, and they are constructed of enormous stones. Now, their original use was probably as a gallery grave where multiple people were buried. And they usually have a very large stela at the head of the structure. Back in the 1850s, historian J.W.W. Tyndale said that the large stela made them look like tombstones over a grave, and that's exactly what they look like. So next is our trip to the Pyramid of Monte de Codi. It's in the northern part of Sardinia, and it's stunningly old. It's a pyramid that is older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. The oldest parts date from about 4000 BC, and the base is 27 meters by 27 meters, which is rather small compared to the base of the pyramid at Giza, which is about 230 meters. In its shape, it's very similar to a Sumerian ziggurat step pyramid, although it does have a very long ramp that leads up to the top of the pyramid. Now, in the surrounding area, there are multiple menhirs that are astronomically significant, including one that lines up to the winter solstice. And they found an altar that may have been aligned to the constellation of the Southern Cross, which is no longer in the Northern Hemisphere. And this shows you how truly ancient this site is. And amazingly enough, it's the only pyramid in Europe. So it's quite rare and unusual. Now, finally, the Villaggio di Tiscale, which when I was doing research about Sardinia, I misread the description of this place. I misread that it was a mystical fairy village in the crater of an ancient volcano. But instead, it turned out to be something even better. It turned out to be a miniature version of a lost world. It's a Bronze Age settlement deep in the heart of a limestone sinkhole. And it was occupied for 1,000 years, including during Roman times. Now, it used to be an underground cavern with a natural hole in the ceiling that allowed light and moisture, and it created a microclimate with plants and trees that are rare to this region. But over the millennia, part of the roof collapsed, and now only 40 structures remain. And those structures are the ones that hug the interior of the cavern. These the remaining structures are typical Bronze Age huts. They're in a circular shape, and then there are later period square and rectangular structures. The other interesting thing about this site is it's extremely hard to get to. And one way to reach it is you have to go through a dark, mysterious crevasse, and then at the end of it, you turn the corner and you've opened up into this amazing sinkhole with these Bronze Age dwellings. Now, in conclusion, and of course, this site is incredibly difficult to find without a guide, and over the years, people constantly get lost, and so if you're going to go to that site, you have to hire a guide. And so, in conclusion, Sardinia is a land of contrasts. It has some incredible high-tech archaeological support for many of their museum sites with tablets and with guided tours in over 20 different languages, and 3D models of all the artifacts in the museum, virtual tours, virtual 3D fly-throughs, and yet many of the archaeological sites themselves are undeveloped, freely available to the public in a natural state. And you can really walk around and experience history firsthand by being out amongst all of these undeveloped undeveloped archaeological sites. Now, once again, always hire a guide, because in 2019, 144 tourists had to call for help because they didn't hire a guide and they got their rental cars stuck on various dirt roads. In fact, a mayor of one of the villages who people kept getting lost and stuck in asked Google to stop routing people to some of these archaeological sites. So Sardinia is not a large place. It's only 9,000 square miles. And from the southernmost part of the island to the northernmost part is the distance from Austin, Texas to Fort Worth, Texas. So about 3 hours, 4-hour drive. So that kind of gives you the scope of how small it is. And yet it has so many incredible things to see and do. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you will all go out and visit Sardinia.
This has not been paid for by the Sardinian Tourist Bureau. But we would love sponsorship.
Yes.
This is fantastic and fascinating. Thank you so much for that. I remember when you were telling me that you are going over there, and I started looking into this place. Just fascinating, amazing. Another example of just how lengthy the human history of civilization is, and how much more interesting it is than people realize. So, have you come across many ideas about any controversial theories about this civilization that aren't necessarily agreed upon by mainstream archaeology? With structures that old, and of course, I think there's the supposed Bosnian pyramid, which is of course hotly disputed and debated as to whether that's actually a natural structure or a man-made structure. So that would be the only, I think, competition for the stated only pyramid in Europe, right?
Yeah, the dates are always disputed with everything. So a lot of these dates are done by best guesses of archaeology. You can't carbon date stones, really. So you have to go by the stuff that's surrounding them. So dates are hotly contested. And then there's that persistent thing, from the beginning of when things were written down, that there are giants here. And nobody knows where that comes from.
Huh. Yeah. It's interesting. Do we know if the stories of giants predate, like, I guess, non-native cultures coming there, or does that actually appear to have been a native belief, or how? I guess we wouldn't know. We
don't know because they didn't leave a written record. None of the Nuragic people had a written language that we found so far. So there's no written record of it. Anything would have been oral, and much of that is just gone. All we know is that when people were looting the Nurages looking for them, that they felt that there were spirits there, so they would mainly loot them during religious holidays when they felt they were protected from the spirits.
That's probably a good idea. If you're gonna be a superstitious, you better err on the side of safety, I suppose.
And there are because the Sardinian Nuragic cultures structures are so unusual. Nobody knows why Nuraghe only show up in Sardinia, and the fact that they were able to build such complex sites so long ago before the rest of the world caught up is also another mystery. And they really don't know who the Nuragic culture is, where exactly they came from, because since it's an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, a lot of people pass through there over the millennia, and so that's definitely, there are a lot of mysteries about the island that modern scientists have yet to unravel. In fact, the pyramid, there are some unproven theories that they might be linked to the Mycenaeans, but that was just a pure, like, somebody just saying, "Oh, it looks similar. It may well be," and so there's no scientific evidence to back that up.
Well, fascinating. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate your contributions to our monthly meetups here. And folks want to ask follow-up questions, you can, of course, visit our website. We'll be posting this and past videos of lectures, some of which are already up there at our YouTube channel. And we will be doing our next monthly meetup on Saturday, July 11th. Not the subject and or speakers to be announced. And that's coming up. Where is that? There we go. Coming up July 11th. And if you have any questions, you can contact us at contact@AnomalyArchives.org. And just thank you so much, Einida and Viktor. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to future presentations.
You're welcome.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Well, everybody, good night, good day. Be safe.